Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from Michigan, USA, Mr. Duke Lott. Duke, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Duke is an author, writer, a podcast host. He's an entrepreneur, he's a diversity consultant, and a crisis prevention instructor. Duke is the host of the Duke Lott Show. He's a certified crisis prevention instructor, motivational speaker, and a diversity lifestyle coach. And he's an author. And all of you know I'm very partial to authors. He's an author of a book titled 100 Lessons for a Successful Interracial Relationship. And we're going to speak about that today. So, Duke, before we talk about your book, tell me about your own journey. And I know you were telling me about your passion for tennis before we started recording.
Yes, part of my journey is that I'm a product of a single mother. I was raised by a Christian mother that taught me values and taught me how to respect people. And I was fortunate in like the sixth grade to meet a foreign exchange student from Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a teacher come to me and say, we would like you to teach him English, and in exchange, he will teach you how to play tennis.
Wow.
So that's what we're talking about. And that's how I learned how to play tennis. I got beat up a lot by him. And I would say within a year, I practiced so much that I loved it and I was able to beat him. So, part of my journey is a sports journey. I am a diversity consultant, and I went to business school at Fair State University, and I also went to Grand Rapids Community College. But I pride myself on being a diverse person, and that's why I wrote the book that I wrote.
Yeah.
I wanted to share my experiences with the world about. So I've been through a divorce, and that's why I was able to write the book, because it was from that failure that led me to success.
Phenomenal. So let's now go talk about your book, 100 Lessons for a Successful Interracial Relationship. And before I ask you any questions, I'm going to ask all our viewers and listeners to go and check out Duke Lott's book. I will go and check it out myself. So Duke, what inspired you to write 100 Lessons for a Successful Interracial Relationship?
Yes, sir. What inspired me was that, like I said, I went through a divorce, and through that, I was able to learn the lessons of what it took to make a successful marriage and how to make things work. Not only that, but how to share cultures with your partner. And I think that was one of the things that broke down in our relationship, was that we didn't share each other's cultures the way that we should have. So over the course of 27 years, I wrote down little notes and learned different lessons of just basically how to learn about someone else and share their culture. So I wrote the book to help people, not only in interracial relationships, but all relationships. So part of my book is it's a practical self-help guide for all relationships. But I put the interracial in the title because as a writer, I wanted to be true to my own journey.
Correct.
And that's what I know.
Correct. Well said. Well said. And can you share a few key lessons from your book?
Yes, I can. Well, part of it is the acceptance of family and just and the rejection of family, because not everyone is going to agree with your relationship, and especially if you mix cultures and different things, and not everyone's going to agree with their interracial relationship. And so part of that is being able to deal with the rejection of others, because society is a place that, a lot of people judge. And so one of the lessons is to be able to deal with that rejection, but also to share cultures, learn about each other, and have the race talk. Don't be afraid to have the race talk. That's one of the lessons that I think is very important in interracial relationships, is to have that talk. People like different things, so, I might like different things than you, but we can come together and figure out how to learn about each other.
Hmm. I love the term "have a race talk." It's very, very powerful. It's important to be able to share, I think, whatever your inner thoughts are. But based on all the work that you must have done for your book, what are some common challenges faced by interracial couples, and how does your book address them?
Yes. Well, some of the common challenges is dealing with family.
Mm,
Family is everything, and I'm a family guy, and I have a close family, and I know that when your family doesn't accept
mm,
what you are a part of, it can be very stressful. So I think that's one of the challenges. One of the big challenges is the acceptance of family,
mm.
and I think in my book that's lesson number 39.
Okay.
That's lesson number 39, and that's the acceptance of family.
Mm,
You have to be able to talk to your family and let them understand that this is who I love, this is who I care about, and let's work together to make sure that we're all happy.
correct. Correct. Well said. And how can individuals navigate cultural differences? You know, you live in one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world.
Yes.
And I'm sure you are seeing a lot of interracial, intercultural marriages. What
Yes.
is your uh, mantra to navigate such differences?
Well, I would say one of my key points is, if I'm correct in the book, it's lesson number 32.
Hmm.
It's don't try to change each other. You
Mm,
know, Certain times in a relationship, people try to change
mm,
their partner to try to get them to be who they want them to be.
mm,
You have to be accepting of who they are,
mm,
and that's my key thing is that don't try to change each other. Embrace each other's cultures, differences, and just be open to learn about someone. And
mm,
so if there's something that you need to change that isn't good,
mm,
then you should change that. But the good
mm,
parts, you want to keep that, and you don't want to change your partner. Let
mm,
them be who they are.
mm. And do you think you can give me some kind of an example of how you have supported someone to navigate cultural differences?
Yes. So one of the things that I talk about in my podcast sometimes is
Mm,
uh, people. There's a big thing going on between us, them, they, and the correct pronouns. So I've had to educate myself on making sure that I'm accepting of other people's differences.
mm,
And when I say that, it's important to not only uh, uh, embrace diversity in relationships, but it's also important to learn about different people because there's so many different
mm,
people. And that's one of the things I like about the Indian culture is that there's so many different spices of life, different foods, and I'm a guy who meditates, so
mm,
I've helped people navigate that situation, and companies say, to change their hiring practices. Don't
mm.
judge a person and don't just hire a person because of their race.
Right.
That's a big thing with being a consultant in diversity,
Mm,
making sure that companies understand you want to give everyone a fair shot. Some
mm,
people have more education than others. Some people hire just for quotas.
mm,
And we don't believe in that. We believe in hiring the best person, but we believe in having a workplace
mm,
um, that allows people to experience different races and cultures, and
mm,
just being able to communicate with each other.
mm. Well said. And in your opinion, what role does open communication play when it comes to interracial relationships or interracial or intercultural relationships?
Yes. If you don't have open communication, you don't have anything.
Mm,
um, Being able to talk to your partner is very key. And
mm,
I think that a lot of times, especially in interracial relationships, you have someone who is scared to express themselves.
mm.
Uh, Sometimes there's people who are aggressive and there's people who are passive.
Right.
And I know that sometimes people that are passive, they don't want to talk about what they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the open communication. You have to be able to express yourself and be able to say, well, I don't want this sandwich. I don't want fried chicken tonight. I want something else, you know?
Mm.
So, and that's just a small
Yeah.
example. And seriously, it is very important to have open communication, because without that, you don't have anything.
Mm. Mm. Well said. And do you believe that uh, to manage an interracial relationship, you require a different set of skills or attitudes as compared to relationship within the same ethnic group or the same race?
Yes, I totally believe in that, because sometimes relationships are challenging
Mm.
no matter what.
Correct.
The relationships are just challenging,
Mm.
period.
Mm.
But when you have different cultures mixing in, it can be a
Mm.
real challenge.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to make sure that not only do you have open communication, but you listen to your
Mm.
partner. And
Mm.
that's the main thing, is that you have to sharpen your listening skills.
Correct.
But after you do that, you have to embrace someone else's culture, learn about it, do some research. There's a
Mm.
difference between being black and white, or being Muslim or Jew. There's a difference, and you have to educate yourself on
Mm.
that. So
Mm.
I believe in interracial relationships, you have to open your mind up to a different world to be able to experience someone else's culture, and not only experience their culture, but experience their pain. Try
Mm.
to understand the stereotypes that they go through.
Mm.
When you go into a store, it might be different for you than it might be for the next person. Try to
Mm.
understand that, and I think
Mm.
that's very key in an interracial relationship, compared to you know being in a relationship where the cultures match.
Mm.
So just educate yourself, and be open to experience their pain.
Mm. But I have often seen that when there is an interracial relationship, the 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 couple is so deeply in love that they don't even talk or think about these things till they start to
Yeah.
live together. Are you
Yes.
suggesting that they should actually go through some kind of training about each other's cultures before they get into the long run?
I think so.
Mm.
And that's my opinion, and I consider myself an expert on this, and this is a lot of research and a lot of studying
Yeah.
into it. And um, if you don't go through that, if you
Mm.
don't experience it, if you don't, test and try, then when the test does come, what are you going to do? Are you going to
Mm.
break down? Are you going to say, oh man, this is too much for me. I don't want to, go through this every day. You have to experience what it's really like before you get into it in the long haul,
Yeah.
because once you take those vows are sacred, and you want to
Mm.
keep those.
Mm.
And so once you're in it, you're in it. But
Mm.
before you get in it, do your research,
Mm.
test out, just go through a little bit of the experiences of what it's going to look like for you before you get into the long haul. One example I can give you is that, say if you were black and white, just say
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
and you go into an event where it's all white people,
Mm.
or Caucasian people, let's say that.
Mm. Mm.
Um, you go into an event and you're the only black face there.
Mm.
How are you going to feel?
Mm.
And if your partner doesn't ask you how you feel, do they really care about
Mm.
your feelings?
Mm.
Because um, I've been in that situation.
Mhm.
A lot of my circles that I'm in, I'm sometimes the only black face in the room,
Mhm.
and that's just that's America, that's life, and we're breaking down those doors as we go.
Mm.
But when you enter that room, you do enter a room and you have feelings. We're all human, so you're gonna
Absolutely.
enter that room and you're like, whoa, this is experience.
Mm.
So you have to be ready for that. And if your partner doesn't care about you enough to ask about that, you should really be asking yourself questions, because um, it might vice versa when you,
Yeah.
if you're the only white person going into a
Mm,
brown and black room, you know, you
mm,
have to
mm.
experience that. So ask questions.
Well said. Well said. My next question is that when it comes to raising children, how
Yeah.
do couples navigate complexities of raising biracial or multiracial or multicultural or multi-religion children?
Yeah. This is in my book. I believe this lesson number 3, and
Mm,
the reason why it's lesson 3, because it
very
becomes
important. Yeah,
the family is very important.
correct.
So once you enter into that stage of having children,
Mm,
it's a whole different set of rules that you need to learn.
mm,
Uh, you know, one thing that I know that's big right now is anti-bullying. You know,
mhm,
kids get bullied at school,
mm,
and depending on what circles you're in, you might have a interracial or multicultural child going
mm,
to a school that may be all, all white or all, African American, and they come home and they're sad, and you ask why, and well, this kid made fun of me because of this or that.
mm,
So when you have children, you have to try to educate yourself on what it's like to be a child growing up in this day and time.
mm,
And it's a blessing that we have came so far as a
mm,
world, as far as accepting others. But there's still challenges, and one of
mm,
the biggest challenges is having an interracial child
mm,
or multiracial child.
mm,
And that's lesson number 3, like I said, and
mm,
it's there because it's so important to
mm,
be able to understand what that child is going through.
mm,
And you have to be able to say, I got your back, let's talk about it. What are you going through? And not only talk to them, but listen to your child.
mm.
Try to understand what they are dealing with in the world that they are living in, because the world that they live in is different than the world that we grew up in.
Right. Well said. My next question, Duke, is that, you know, what are some of the red flags that couples need to watch out for
Yes.
with, when a relationship starts to run into challenges?
Yeah. Well, one of the red flags and I put it, I believe, I put it in the book in a strategic place, and I believe it's lesson number 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it's opinions matter. That's one of the red flags to me.
Mm,
That's a huge red flag, is
yeah.
when your partner doesn't value your
Mm,
opinion,
mm,
and now you're in a situation where you're speaking or listening,
mm,
and your opinion doesn't matter.
mm,
So be able to learn and know, if you're in a relationship, if your opinion matters to your
mm,
partner,
mm.
because if your opinion doesn't matter, that's a huge red flag. And we all have
Yeah.
opinions, so
Yeah.
you just have to be able to be wise enough and smart enough to be able to see if your opinion really matters to your partner.
Mm, mm. Amazing. And how important is self-awareness and personal growth of individuals in an interracial relationship?
But yeah, you have to master the art of letting go. You
Mm,
know, if you master the art of letting go, and not let so many things bother you,
mhm,
um, it will help you have a successful relationship, and especially a successful interracial relationship. And you have to be able to, I think one of the phrases is like water off a duck's back.
mm,
You have to be able to let go of the things that really don't matter,
mm,
and value the things that do matter.
mm,
And that's important. And I think that comes with sharing cultures too, because certain cultures value different things.
mm,
But if you master the art of letting go and not letting the small stuff bother
mm,
you, it will help you be successful in your relationship.
mm. Amazing. So I have time for two more questions for you. My next
Okay.
question is that how can individuals or both individuals in an interracial relationship overcome their own biases or prejudices,
Yes.
because we are who we are, and one of the things that we all live with is an ego,
Yes. Yeah.
and that ego could be big, small. We all know that an ego is good, but it could generally not that good.
Yeah.
How can individuals overcome their own biases, their own prejudices, and their own egos?
Well, that's a complex question. I mean, uh, if you're able to get yourself a guru, that's one of the things I can say. I mean,
Okay.
uh, but in all seriousness, you have to be able to deal with the possibility of non-acceptance.
Mm.
Not everyone is going to accept what you or who you love.
Mm.
But you love who you love. You care about who you care about, and you just have to be able to take what's given to you and still be caring. A lot of times we let our egos get in the way
Mm.
of what we are trying to achieve or what we are, considered to be love. One of
Mm.
the things that I like to practice is called agape love. And that kind of love is accepting of all.
Mm.
You love unconditionally, and you have to be able to know how to get to that point. And it
Mm.
takes a lot of mastering. You have to master yourself before you can give an opinion to someone else. And that's the one thing that I've worked on. And in writing this book, I had to fail before I succeeded.
Mm.
And that was the key for me is like, okay, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, but now what can you do to fix it? Get your
Mm.
ego out of the way, figure out how to fix it so
Mm.
that the next time you can be better and you can be what your partner needs.
Mm.
And we all have different things that we go through, but if you master the art of just being accepting of others, deal with the possibility of being non-accepted, and just
Mm.
put it together to try to make your relationship the best it can be. That's all you can do is try and just
Amazing.
try to do the best you can.
Yeah, what a wise response. Thank you. And my last question to you: what strategies or resources would you recommend for couples who are struggling with maintaining a healthy and fulfilling interracial relationship?
Understand that it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that it's going to be a process. It's going to be great at times, and you're also going to have those rough patches.
Mm.
I think that one of the strategies, the best strategy that you can ever have in a relationship is to be a good listener. So at the beginning of my book,
Mm.
I took
Mm.
the poem of just listen. And my grandmother used to say that all the time, be
Mm.
more of a listener than a speaker. Talk less and listen more.
Yeah.
And that to me is part of that process. Just understand it's going to be a process.
Mm.
And I'm into personal growth, and I think that in a relationship you have to be into the growth of your relationship.
Mm.
So without the process, you can't grow. So just embrace the process, and if you're in it for the long haul, understand that there's going to be times when it's not going to be great,
Mm.
but you can have more good times than bad.
Correct. Correct. Well said. Duke, on that note, I really want to say thank you, but I want to
Yes,
say that I'm amazed at how you remember all your lesson numbers. I mean, it is so fascinating. Thank you for
yes,
talking to me about your journey. Thank you for talking to me about your book, 100 Lessons for a Successful Interracial Relationship. We spoke
yes,
about race talk. We spoke
yes,
about accepting family. We spoke about don't attempt to change each other. We spoke
yes,
about open communication. We spoke about bringing up interracial children. We spoke about ego. And we finally spoke about be a good listener and not
yes.
a constant speaker. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Duke. And
Can I show the cover of my book? Can I show the
absolutely,
cover? Is that okay?
please show us the
All
book.
right. This is the cover, and
Yeah,
this is the back, and that's me. And
absolutely.
so
Wonderful.
yes,
So I'm
we
going to
we thank
order this book and I'm going to read it.
we thank you. So
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for your support, and I just want to say it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of the show. And thank you for all you do around the world to support people, to showcase people, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.